actually, maybe this could be a good start for us, is just to introduce yourself and a little bit about your background, both work, but maybe personal, like how did you end up being in this field on the first place?
Sure, of course. So I was originally born in Tokyo, and I moved to the Netherlands when I was relatively young, and I lived in London for a while, or grew up there briefly, uh, and also ended up coming over to the States. I was in San Francisco initially, um, spent some time back in Tokyo, and then came back to the States. Was in San Francisco again and in New York for a while, and now I'm back in San Francisco. So yeah, I've spent sort of a variety of different time on different in Asia and Europe and also sort of continental North America. And yeah, spent just sort of different experiences, different times of life.
Yeah, definitely. Is
So
there any like highlights that are super memorable? Like running an ice cream corporation before starting tech, or like did California get you into technology, or was it sort of like your work that brought you to California?
I think there's a relationship between sort of who you are and where you spend a lot of time. There's an inevitability between where you spend time for whatever reason growing up. More often than not, you don't have control over where you grow up as much. So I think the nature versus nurture argument being it's rather hard to say if it's the place or if it's just me. But it's hard, I think, even through, I think Paul Graham has the essay of Cities and Ambition, where he talks a little bit about kind of the core idea would be that cities sort of have an end game, and there's just kind of a cultural goal that the location is trying to kind of go towards. San Francisco's history, for example, is very young. At 18 late 1800s, it was a city of people chasing gold and prostitutes and crime mostly until about the 1900s when it started to establish itself post kind of gold rush. So very early city. It's a city of California is a place of opportunity. There was an abundance of land that was available in one form or another, both through good means and maybe not so good means. But it become a place of I think there's an opportunity and land kind of come together. A lot of
Is it kind of
yeah.
like,
So
I don't know, I don't want to be like stretch the comparison, but in a way, there's sort of like a gold rush right now with meme coins and crypto trading. And what we saw a few years ago, that a lot of these people who made a lot of money chasing somewhat quick opportunities then turns into builders building with a more long-term vision. Do you see any parallel there as well?
I think that yeah. Again, I mean, I think it's you look through sort of different moments in history, like the gold rush, and in a way, there's definitely an element of similarity for sure. I think I would say that the one thing that's a little bit different is just the speed at which the the gold rush happens, and also I think meme coins are different. What's the kind of way to describe it? I think of it as more, it's a different kind of. I think the financial sort of chasing aspect of it is very similar, but I think the inherent nature of meme coins themselves are a sort of different beast altogether. But if anything, I don't think of many of the chasing, riches is not something that's particularly new. Uh, I think of kind of the um, what was it the stock market. But one of the largest bubbles was the South Sea Company. I think like back in the 1700s, and Isaac Newton lost most of his wealth essentially trading shitcoins, essentially with investments that were being made for companies that were being established overseas, colonies that were going to be made, and he bought at the he sold at the bottom and kept buying and buying as it went down. and lost a lot of his fortune. So again, I don't think of this as anything particularly new. That aspect of it is not new. The gold rush is just another metaphor, maybe, but I would think of those kind of comparisons.
Yeah, no, I didn't know the story about Isaac Newton. I will have to read about that. Sounds very, very interesting. And you're currently working on something that I believe is new, and I believe you also think it's kind of a radical new idea, right? Which is, so you're working on Faust, and you recently announced Rock, right? And that's why I'm very excited to talk to you today, because it sounds very revolutionary. I feel like it's in the early days, right? But the concept sounds very, very innovative. Can you tell us a bit about how do you define rock? What is rock exactly?
Yeah, so the short story is fun. Is we're building a device. We recently announced a piece of hardware that we've been working on for the past recent year in a little bit, and we call it Rock. The idea fundamentally is that we can notarize reality on chain, sort of IRL things on chain, or just notarize it, sort of period. One of the things that we think is essentially it's difficult today for a lot of people who are in kind of on-chain native. I presume that people who are going to listen to this are going to be kind of more or less so. Well, actually, it depends. This is going to be more. It's mostly like crypto focused, is my guess.
It can be a mix.
Okay, then the idea would be most fundamentally just to sort of be able to notarize something and prove that something happened. Today, it's just really hard in the digital world. As you have like many copies of the same thing, that's just been the case in the digital world. And now with generative AI in general, now you can have every iteration of the same, of copies. And so we just see a world in the long run where how do you prove that sort of like things are real? And we think that notarizing reality is one of the first ways that we can cryptographically prove that sort of things are real. And we thought of it sort of from the hardware level. We could build something that could prove that sort of things are real.
That's interesting that it's on the hardware level, because in my mind, the first terms that associate with that idea are a digital twin, because the concept of a digital twin has been discussed for a long time, and then I don't know if this relates to also real world assets, which is another topic that seems to be picking up. Could you maybe like elaborate a little longer the role of the hardware in all of that?
Yeah, think of it sort of as like I guess like one kind of thing to context of this is my background is in robotics, and we kind of, if anything, think of Faust itself in the long term as a robotics company. We're mostly actually like a robotics company. Our innovation isn't going to come from. I mean, there's other things we can do, but fundamentally, that's sort of where our skills are in building things that move, building things, do things in the real world, and if anything, part of the sort of longer term thesis is that, we just think that there will be sort of these trillions of machines on chain that are going to have identities and be able to transact with each other. And, probably like a lot of more autonomous AI agents as well, eventually on the sort of cloud side. But fundamentally, we think that there's just going to be sort of physical AGI essentially happening. And in the long run, this idea that Amazon or Apple or Google own or OpenAI owns all the robots is not like a particularly exciting future for me. And I think also the other part of it is that robotics or foundational models are going to become increasingly commoditized, and as that happens, what is the approach for more of this decentralized physical AGI where people can build, sort of anyone can participate in building robots instead of it just sort of all being owned kind of by one company. And yeah, so coming at it from that perspective, we really Rock, if anything, was a starting point for us of how to explore how do we build a hardware and operating system that is going to be useful for people on day one. Where can we start that will really, we want to make something that's useful for customers on day one, but also puts us on this path. And we almost see this attestation and proving things in the real world as kind of an entry point in a market to start with relative to sort of building more of a robotics company. And asking ourselves, is there an opportunity to build the next great robotics company starting on chain? And is that sort of something that we can do? And or not? Who knows? Really, it's TBD. But
Mm. That's quite interesting. I mean, maybe something related to that. You mentioned AI and the agents and all these, digital agents, but also robots in the physical world. Um, and that's highly related. So something that I'm interested in is how are we going to differentiate between humans and AI agents, right? Because many people think of AI agents. Some people think of them as kind of they have a negative intention, right? But there will be many that have a clear, goal and positive goal in society or doing a special activity. But we still want to differentiate easily who is human and who is not, right? And I think that's where the WorkCoin is trying to do, right? It's more on authenticating. But in your case, it seems more like, yeah, authenticating more for robots and bringing value to that kind of activity, right? And so I find it very interesting. I see a lot of potential, but as you said, it's kind of very early, right? So I'm wondering, um, how does it look for you, or how does it look these days? How do you focus on building this company, which the could be early, right? Could be early, but at the same time, we are seeing how everything is moving very fast, right? So how is your like kind of day to day, or how do you create these experiments or these concepts, and how do you test them today?
yeah, so I think fundamentally hardware and then especially robotics in the longer run is a very sort of long term testing process. I think for many folks that kind of come from software, the expectation is that things will happen quickly and you'll be able to build them and deploy. Something like like deployment to a website is relatively quick these days. But if you want to deploy, if you want to ship a bunch of devices to customers, it's a process of manufacturing and sort of supply chain sourcing components, who's going to handle QC. There's sort of a lot more involved. So it's definitely a process. But the testing, I think, more or less so is often independent of that manufacturing as well. So there's sort of software tests and that you can do that are relatively normal, and then there's also kind of an alternative part of it, which is you know testing that the market exists, and
Mm.
then there's sort of another part of it, which is testing whether the hardware will work in real life. So I think we've primarily cut corners initially more to test kind of markets and see the kind of define the device that we'll start with, and more or less so kind of start from there. But it's I wouldn't say I'd say it's a little bit longer journey and maybe, but yeah, it's sort of what we want to do. So
And do you see rock as so kind of a hardware or a device for consumers or more for companies? And is it more B2B or B2C? What are your thoughts there?
yeah, I think we're starting with kind of this. I think protocols, sort of being protocols, and sort of devs in general being the target,
Mm.
not sort of B2C in the sense of maybe you buy this so that you can use it in the same way you'd use iPhone or something, but really more as a kind of development platform. So more somewhere something that you can build software and program this to sort of do things that you want it to do, but at the same time an ability to customize it specifically for a protocol and do something that is so targeting more protocols to begin with. So it's not purely B2B, but I think we will be focusing on businesses for sure, but starting more with people who are just really interested in hacking real world use cases for protocols, because I think what we can do is, to sort of answer your question, I guess a little bit from earlier, is why hardware is because we want to be able to connect. We want to extend smart contracts today are essentially mostly limited to being online or on chain, and this world can be extended further out into the real world if there's hardware that will, and sensors and all this infrastructure that is there to sort of support those protocols. So it increases the amount of things that can sort of be captured and used and prove that they can be sort of real world things can be tied more into the on-chain world.
Is it chain agnostic, or would it be able to, well, like, what would it be compatible with?
Yeah, I think EVM compatible chains is really like, Ethereum and L2's LP stack, the super chains, anything that, I think that's the area that we're starting in. We'll probably extend it further out, and again, it's not really even chain agnostic only in the sense that it can be tied to Farcaster because Farcaster has keys. Really don't, if anything, sort of crypto is a component of some of the customers that we're sort of testing out in a way in the long run. Again, kind of coming back to where we're doing is we're really sort of focused on building the hardware and the eventually more of the sort of robotic side of things in the longer run. And the crypto is sort of a feature and a sort of starting point that we see in a market to start with. Sort of very small, even engaged community, interested folks, a specific use case that we can a few specific use cases we can tackle, and we kind of hope to sort of extend from there.
No, that makes sense. I'm just curious about because I saw your thread on Farcaster, and I wonder if there is some sort of beta access. How is this going to be rolled out? How do you start to introduce hardware that it's highly tied to software, right? And you're looking for developers to test it out. So how does that look like? Is there a plan already for the beta access?
Yeah, we've been running a private program for about the past 6 months or so, with some folks that have been building on our device, and it'll be a process. I think we have about 10 at the moment, and sort of to get to the next level of order of magnitude, next 100 units, 1,000 units, etc., will be a process that will have a little bit more of a different plan. But I think our eventual sort of next step is sort of doing some pre-orders and sort of doing, figuring out a way to kind of get it more into people's hands. And yeah, there's definitely a big gap, I would say, between 10 to 100 units and another sort of different kind of gap in terms of scale and mass production units that we expect between 100 and 1,000 units or 10,000 units. Mm-hmm. So depending on kind of the gauging demand and what is sort of like the interest level that we see, we will manufacture or build them just in time to kind of get it out to people.
Yeah, how can we get one? We would like to get one.
Yeah, just order home through Amazon.
Yeah,
I have a question because
go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. There's like, I noticed there's a diagram which says there's AI, there's cryptography, and robotics. These are some of the most advanced and difficult areas right now. How did you build your team? I think I can only imagine how difficult it must be to recruit the required talent for each different section. Like, how is that?
Yeah, so my background is, I previously worked on building autonomous cars and autonomous vehicles, and I was at Kitty Hawk, which is a sort of like was a private Google X company that was focused on building autonomous flying cars. I was there for about half a decade, and the team that I was on was called Kitty Hawk Flyer. We built a vehicle that did over 25,000 flights, flew a bunch of people on it. It was a pretty big operation by the end, and probably could talk a lot more about that as well if you're curious.
I'd love to see flying cars. Yeah. I don't think I saw those yet. I don't even know about it.
Yeah, if you look up crazy. Kitty Hawk Flyer, I think Kitty Hawk Flyer, there's some videos as well of kind of people of us flying and building these sort of autonomous vehicles. So long story short, I'm happy to talk more about Kitty Hawk. Most of our team is from Kitty Hawk. We have people that are mostly ex-Kitty Hawk, ex-Tesla, ex-Apple. So I think if anything, there's still, the one thing I think is it's easy to forget in just online world, I guess, and in general is like Silicon Valley some of the like smartest people that I've ever worked with all like work at pretty big companies, and they're doing things. Then they're not on Twitter and they're not on Farcaster, and they're usually just kind of doing their job, and they got hired, maybe out of college or something, and they've been working, and they've just kind of like been allowed to do things, or they work on pretty interesting projects. And if anything, I think there's just a lot of really, I don't even know if talented is the word, but just really capable people that work in these places that you just don't hear about, I think. And Kitty Hawk was one of the places that I worked at that had some of the best engineers that I've ever worked with in my entire life, and essentially like a very capable sort of like world-class team that knows how to execute. And yeah, there's reasons as to why the project failed and stuff, but
it's interesting because, like you mentioned, these teams typically have that package and it's comfortable and it's comfy. Why leave? And but you left and you started your own. You got outside of that comfort bubble to pursue something new. And I'm wondering, why do you think your team followed you and not just moved to another department? Like, is it becoming more popular for people to experiment, or I don't know.
Yeah, so in 2020, I think the project essentially, we were about to sort of launch the vehicle. We've done all these tests, and we've been working on it for sort of years, essentially. And the project got canceled during COVID, so the team got slashed. A bunch of us got fired. Like most of the team got fired, and the opportunity to kind of move to other projects seemed, if anything, kind of more of the same. So now, like, essentially there were about, I think, 7 or 8 vehicles, or there were a few vehicles at the time that were being worked on at Kitty Hawk, and now Kitty Hawk's pretty much, I think, almost gone. I think they still exist as an entity, but the closest, I think, is like Whisk.Aero, which was a long-term project that went on for a while. So part of it is yeah, the sort of, we were building the future, and the sort of future was canceled. So kind of we're like, well, I don't, how do you go forward? How do you, might as well just kind of build the future ourselves. And so I think there's this element of highly capable people who were denied an opportunity to kind of make, to ship something in, that people and everyone could use. And with the scope and project, I think, one of the things about Kitty Hawk and what I would like for Faust in the long run as well is an element of, you just kind of know that it's worth doing. So it's sort of not, you'd rather be doing this than sort of anything else. It's not a like, oh, I think this is going to probably work, and we'll have like a small exit. It's more, it's closer to a moonshot, I guess, in a way. It is much more the kind of people that I think it attracted. So yeah, to be denied the opportunity to not be able to see the project to fruition, I think is extra motivation to, it's kind of like we didn't get to play in the playoffs. So it's like, well, I want to go back, I want to go back to that. And so if anything, I think for me, starting something was, part of it is definitely about this desire to recreate the team and recreate, not the exact team, of course, but this sort of the same culture and the same, to be able to sort of reach that building the future stage.
What were the challenges? I mean, when we think about autonomous flying cars, so what are the biggest, challenges when building like the super complex project, right? But maybe from the outside, it's hard to grasp the exact complexities. Is it? I don't know. What can you tell us about that after working half a decade in such an interesting project? What did you learn in terms of the complexities of that? You said there were like 7 different cars. Is it more like regulation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like more of the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess it depends who you ask, but I think the biggest challenge, there's sort of like two. I'd say like there's a big challenge, like challenges technically, sort of engineering challenges, and then I think there's sort of business challenges still as well, specifically in the case where it doesn't quite make sense yet for some of these things, or there's engineering challenges, safety challenges, the ability for many vehicles to. Yeah, so there's a lot of different challenges, and I think engineering challenges were challenging, but more in a sense possible, kind of the easiest ones in a way, because you can overcome them to a certain extent in some capacity. It's more of like a resource and time problem, whereas some of the business ones, I think are in some senses they were more challenging, and also the pace in which you can build them and deploy them and test them means that you don't get as many opportunity to see if you have a product market fit in a way, I think. So those
It's
are
in-
more of the challenging things, I think.
I recently saw one of VC posted on X about these days it's not so much about product market fit, it's more about narrative market fit. Do you think this sort of like, do you see that around some of your colleagues who are building products and launching their own startups?
Yeah, I mean, I think narrative definitely matters. Obviously, as you can see with meme coins and anything from meme coins to stories and that take place, and but again, usually more often than not, it's not like you're kind of coming up with a story that resonates and there's just sort of nothing behind it. I think people resonate with stories because there's an element of truth and there's sort of an element of something that makes sense. So I don't think that if you don't have the thing, or another part of it is if you're not capable, especially with more, I think, deep tech startups in general and hard tech problems, if you can't deliver it, if you can't deliver the project, it's kind of, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's gonna fail, and many projects
I
aren't going
think
to work
like in the
out for
sense of
various.
like, oh, AI and blockchain might be more sexy right now than focusing on something else that can also be solving for a good problem, but it's just people think that there's much higher return through this direction.
I'm not. I don't think. Sorry. What do you mean by like AI and blockchain? I guess it's like. Do you mean just like the terms, or sort of like
The sort of like the technology.
Yeah.
So like if sort of like someone who is incorporating AI right now in what they're building, they have a better chance at raising rather than someone who is looking for more traditional ways to grow their product.
Are you saying if you include AI in the name, you'll be able to raise more? Is that what?
Not in the
Yeah, I
name,
think
but
in the use
in the
case.
product. Yeah, in the
Yeah.
use
Yeah,
case.
but also, but I think Alex also mentions like the
Yeah.
intersection between AI and blockchain, right? Like those two combined, that seems to be a hot topic these days.
Yeah, like I heard from several investors already that these are the areas they're looking at and they're pausing investments into some other areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, I think there's two sides of the table, obviously, right? So there's one side, which is the founder and builder side, thinking about how to kind of frame their problem and product and all of that. And then I think from the investor side, 100% that makes, I guess like from the founder side, that doesn't make sense. And from the investor side, that 100% makes sense, because you're going to bet on markets and you're going to bet on areas of growth with really large TAMs that, because of the VC model, and you want to hit home runs. So it can be more general, but I think approaching from the founder side in a way of saying this is like AI and blockchain is kind of like what I want to be. Maybe that is possible for some folks, but I think it's much better time spent thinking more about what are the kind of problems that you want to solve more and what excites you more as a builder or founder than trying to get into the latest, hottest thing, because that's usually not going to be good. But I think it makes 100% sense from the investor side, because those are the areas that are becoming hot. I think it's the difference between like, kind of trying to think of like an example. It's like the difference between sort of football statistics and like football players. So like football statisticians will say this is like kind of generally what you should do, because this is what like most players do, and this is what you should do, and this is where it's going to be good. But then players are going to be like, look, I'm just like trying to play the game, and I'm going to try to optimize for playing the game that like I know how to play the game. And so there's always going to be a divide between sort of looking at it as kind of a whole versus being a sort of player in the game. And the approach to those things, I think, are different. That's just my take.
No, yeah, I agree. I think some of the best companies, they don't even like need that check, and then some others are really good at telling stories, but eventually there's very little.
I think Alex got for a bit, but
yeah,
yeah,
I think
I
we're
understand
running
where
close
you're
to.
coming from.
Yeah.
how can I try Rock, and how does the device look like? Because I haven't
Yeah.
seen, I don't know if I missed them, but I think I haven't seen any pictures. So I'm
Yeah.
just very curious
Yeah.
about the size. What can
Yeah.
people expect from this first iteration?
That's a great question. I unfortunately can't talk about that too much, even though uh, I can talk to you about it, outside of this podcast, honestly.
Okay.
Okay, guys, after
But
we turn off recording, we're gonna find out everything.
yeah, so we're not ready to announce it, not because it's like we want to keep it secret, but because we just really don't know exactly how this is going to go as well, and we want to sort of be able to tell something that we're excited about in a way that we're excited about. And
Mhm.
I think I guess you mentioned in the sort of like narrative market fit is I've also seen many companies that have built a really amazing technology and amazing things, but have just had very poor marketing, very poor narratives in a way that just really undersell what it could do short.
Mm.
And so we want to make sure that we want to tell, we want to communicate what we're doing in a way that resonates with our audience. And so I think we've refrained from trying to hastily put things together and sort of launch it. Even in the launch thread, I think we did like many iterations of the thread and wrote it out and tried different things. We had a lot more plans to. We were going to initially do pre-orders, and then we cut that. We were going to do pre-order videos. We cut that. We were going to do website. We cut that. It's like we just kind of boiled it down to like, what do we want to communicate here, and let's just sort of communicate that today, so we can kind of keep going and working on.
Yeah,
what we're
it even
doing.
says, unfortunately, no one can know what rock actually
Yeah.
is. That kind of leaves room for
So,
interpretation, which is great.
yeah. But we wanted to get something out just so that we can start the conversation, and that's how we're getting started. But yeah, again, I wish that we could, do these things quicker and that we could ship them faster and get them to folks. And it's not, yeah, there's sort of just a timing and cadence to, especially I think like building more kind of physically tangible things, and we're accepting that reality.
No, it takes time.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Makes sense. But I also think it's very bold to start, putting it out there, even if it's on a conceptual level. And
Yeah.
and there are now many people expecting it, right? So whenever the first version is ready to be ordered or shipped, there will be people, right, waiting for it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and if anything, I think also, kind of we've been wanting to, I think there's also always this balance between kind of the longer term thing that we want to do and the shorter term, how do we kind of get something out and, sort of get feedback really and see how it exists in the world. And we want to do more and more, but also, starting with a really, really large project is always a very difficult and daunting task, because you need to, do so much to get just even one version of it working. So there's a lot more that, even with the announcement, there's a lot more that I personally, I think, when I first started writing the launch thread, like drafts, we covered a lot more ground in terms of the ideas that we had for what we wanted to ship and some of the things that we wanted to talk about. And I think it felt to me that we cut it down to like maybe 5% of what we wanted to talk about. And then we just focused on that 5% instead of everything that we wanted to talk about. Because I think when we started trying to do that, you just quickly realize, well, A, it's not quite clear enough yet to talk about, and B, let's just focus on this sort of initial part, especially for customers, to get them excited. That even the first part is exciting. I had to convince myself that it's exciting. I forgot that it's exciting, because I'm so excited about what's kind of beyond rock as well. So,
And so Rock, and just to maybe summarize, Rock is the first product of Faust, right? And then you expect that maybe there are more products or more offerings in the future. Is that how you see it?
yeah, I think again, who knows how these things are going to go? We don't know, but we're focused on rock as being the starting point, and unless sort of things change, that's the sort of goal, and we have plans to get it into people's hands as quickly as we can.
So stay tuned, everyone. Turn notifications on for July and Faust, and we're gonna stay
Yeah.
tuned.
Awesome. Thanks so much, July. Great meeting you. And yeah, we'll talk after the podcast about the device now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Best part.
Sure. Thanks for having me and thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.